Thanks for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons. The following presentation is the result of active players in the community who dictate the actions of these characters by way of the Peoplz and Dragons interactive RPG game show. If you're enjoying the content, then please like, share, and maybe subscribe. If you want to join in on the action, visit our website at pndrpg.com. The golden mean is for the weakling. It was not meant for the likes of the Rezinocs of the world. Episode 1. Origins. Rezinoc walks into the Gate Center's giant training facility, looking all around and above him as 30 or so Gate students and agents can be seen exercising, training, and watching demonstrations. The combination of Atlas funding and the Gate Center's superior training instructors made for hell of an experience. It had a very diverse roster of teachers whose wisdom was more effective than any equipment Atlas could provide. A Gate student approaches Rezinoc during his trance of captivation and waves his hand in front of his face. Rez turns and sees a young man in his mid-20s with powder white hair, legit concerned by Rez's spacing out. "Hey, nice to meet you. I wasn't sure if you were using your powers or something." Rez snaps back and shakes his hand, expressing his excitement to be inside of the Gate Center and among so many different types of mutants. He introduces himself as Chronicle and laughs and mockingly recites an overused pro-mutant mantra. "There are no types, only gamma types." He explains that he is here to improve himself. Rez asks Chronicle what he's capable of, to which Chronicle replies, "A little bit of everything." Rez begins to laugh hysterically when a smug trainer approaches and with a condescending tone informs Rez and Chronicle that he's in such a good mood that he's gonna offer combat training. Chronicle respectfully declines, and the smug trainer states that he agrees with his decision. The two seem to have some history. Rez gladly accepts the invitation and asks the trainer where they're going to be fighting. "Hey, not so fast. Everyone wants a lesson from me." He explains that the student must get through the course, and whoever gets to him first gets to face him. The camera cuts to a close-up of Rez's eyes. They are telegraphing his brain's curiosity. Rez practically falls into a trance while analyzing the cocky instructor and not detecting anything abnormal about him, which made it all that much more exciting for Rez. A bead of sweat drips down Rez's forehead. Could his mutation lie within his forearms? Those scars, they're odd. Perhaps a mental power justifying the diameter of his cranium. Rezinoc's eyes jump from one characteristic of the trainer to another, identifying various peculiar attributes. Rez snaps out of it when the instructor nudges his shoulder gently, asking him if he's okay. Rez assures them he's fine. We cut to Rez and 4 other students who are all donning their training uniforms, stretching and warming up adjacent to each other at the starting point of the Gate Center's highly advanced virtual hard light obstacle course. A massive, almost cave-like entrance was what stood before them all. It was built into the ground and under the Gate Center. Rez glances up at the entrance and sees nothing but an artificial screen of darkness. The course syncs up with the temple jacks that are attached to each student's temple like a radio station. Rez marvels at each student beginning to activate their hidden mutations. Two of them, seemingly brother and sister, look to be able to manipulate energy as the younger tomboyish girl calls a hovering board of red energy up under her feet that lifts her a few feet off of the ground. Her brother turns and sees Rez watching in awe and cockily activates his power, causing a red glowing ball cap made of red energy to appear on his head. He turns it backwards, causing a gust of wind to blow throughout the training room. The third student appears to have some sort of helmet-like contraption on his head and does not appear to be confident at all. The instructor can be heard giving him a pep talk, fixes his chin pointing it upward, and points to his helmet and says, "Your power is up here. Have confidence." The last student looks tense and focused, and appears to be sizing up his competition as well when his and Rez's eyes meet. Rez doesn't see anything peculiar but does notice a slight increase of intensity appear within his eyes. The countdown begins from 3, and the course referees instruct the students to sync their temple nodes to the appropriate wave. Rez does so, and there before them all is what looks like a winding and twisting stone pathway floating above a prehistoric forest. Gigantic flying beasts, half reptile, half machine, can be seen circling over the course as they lag and dip in frames per second. The virtual technology was excellent, but will likely be amongst the first things to get revamped during Atlas's renovations. Many more obstacles appear on the pathway, awaiting its challengers. Rez announces his apology toward all of them and tells them that he will be the one to spar with the trainer in the end. They are all surprised by his confidence, and even more so when they see the confidence on his face. The bell tolls, and all of the students begin to run except for Rez and the girl on her hoverboard of energy. Rez watches her as she seems to be having a hard time controlling her board. He understands what she needs to do at a moment's glance. He deduces that she is too anxious, and her anxiousness is sapping her concentration. Rez turns away from her and nonchalantly forms a visor with his hand over his face, blocking out the sun, and sees all of them running at pretty average speeds. But the helmet kid is gaining ground and looks like he's starting to float a bit. Rezinoc stretches real quick, and then in one step he is propulsed by a wave of energy empowered by storm winds that sends him flying toward his opponents and catching up with them instantly. Rez dashes again, passing both Energy Cap and the focused student. He then turns around and waves at them both as he begins to run normally. This ignites a fire in the intense student's eyes, and he begins to push himself, allowing him to gain on Rez. Suddenly, a stone wall shoots up directly in front of them all. Rez screeches to a halt, then leaps vertically upward, carried by the wind, and is able to grab hold of the top ledge. Energy Cap is astonished by Rez's mobility, and so is the tense student, who clenches his fist in inspiration and slams his hands into the stone, shedding blood, and begins to climb with leaps and bounds. Energy Cap, surprised, was not expecting these two to be so damn fast. Energy Cap turns around to locate where his sister is, just as she zooms over his and the others' heads on her hoverboard, clearing the wall and catching up with Rez. Soon followed by Helmet Boy, who has just now gotten hold of his new power and has formed a telekinetic bubble around himself that lifts him up and over the wall. Energy Cap taps into his hat, causing it to glow. He then starts to run up the wall, defying gravity entirely. We cut to Rezinoc, who we see dipping and evading oncoming laser beams being fired from ridiculous-looking dinosaur men as he progresses forward. He continues to utilize his own concoction of wind and energy manipulation to maneuver through the course, but is soon engaged by a reptilian warrior wielding a double-edged vibroblade and gets very close to striking Rez with it, but he energy dashes out of the way and continues running. The pathway then flips vertically, pulling the ground out from underneath all of them. One slip would send its competitors falling to their figurative deaths. Rez reacts fast enough to grab and hold onto the cracks in the stone when suddenly his hand gets crushed by Energy Cap's foot intentionally as he runs by, still defying gravity. The intense student, with newfound strength, catches up with Rez and attempts to pass him, but is immediately peppered with gunfire all to his back as giant reptilian helicopter hybrids spawn out of the blue and attack. Although they weren't actual bullets, the course sends a signal that triggers immense pain and discomfort to the points of impact, causing him to lose grip and fall off of the course, but is saved when the platform returns to a horizontal form. Rez, though very capable when utilizing what he learns, was no athlete and learns that this course is a bit more challenging than perceived. Rezinoc rolls and rolls and rolls, avoiding the rapid gunfire of the course's strange manifestations. He then pushes up off of the ground, boosted by a blast of wind from his hands that sends him into the air. He then creates a tornado under his feet that keeps him lofty, and for the first time fires a beam of red energy aimed for the machine that comes out a bit awkward and inaccurate, but still hits the wing of the creature, causing it to spin, crash, and burn. Rez, slightly angered, begins to coast across the obstacle course at high speeds on his roaring tornado until he reaches the Energy Cat boy. He begins to gain on him and concentrates hard on his tornado, making it extra powerful and wide so that it crashes into Energy Cap and attempts to knock him off the course, and it does so. Energy Cap is lifted off of his feet, sent into a spiral, and then thrown outward from the course, out of reach of anything to grab onto. Energy Cap slaps his hat, causing it to glow once more, triggering his entire body to grow 10 times his original size, allowing him to grab onto the whole course path with one hand and pull himself back up, reverting to his normal size. The dinosaur man catches up to him and plunges its weapon, impaling Energy Cap's upper arm, then kicks him onto the ground. Energy Cap screams in pain, then taps his hat, causing a giant 700-ton block of energy to fall from the sky, crashing and landing on his enemy. It was so heavy that it shatters the pathway, breaking it completely apart. Rez gains on Hoverboard Girl. She seems to have become more proficient with her energy manipulation. That is, until she turns and sees Rez approaching on a chariot of wind, then both flying through the arms of giant spawning reptilian humanoids trying to swat them out of the air. When she first turns and sees Rezinoc approaching, she flinches, causing her energy board to pop and bend out of shape for a second. Rezinoc arrives parallel from her and holds his glowing red hand outward. And though he is anxious to blast off another beam, he knows that the only obstacle needed for her was fear. So he charges his hand up more and makes it very scary looking. Threatened by his ability to blast waves of energy, she braces herself, completely ignoring the giant stone loop that spawned ahead of her, when suddenly her energy board expands, implodes, and explodes like a dysfunctional rocket, blowing off her whole left leg as she twirls uncontrollably in a spiral of blood toward the floating stone loop, but is caught by her brother mid-air and immediately unsinks his sister and himself from the obstacle course. Rez shows little sympathy and is more so concerned about how he could fit her style of energy manipulation into his own. Rez had seen R-Type X create thousands of razor-sharp lotus petals. Maybe a hoverboard was a bit too easy. Rez puts his focus back on the obstacle course and returns back to the ground to rest his concentration and returns to running, but becoming more fatigued and is fast approaching the end of the course. We cut to the outside of the training simulation and we see 3 veteran instructors watching the race very intensely, while we see gate paramedics rushing to tend to the injured gate trainees. It was commonplace for students to be hurt by their own powers in the training rooms, as the instructors usually pushed the students to their limits. The training instructors ask the smug trainer who Rez was and what it is exactly he can do. The smug trainer goes, and while rubbing the back of his neck, he tells them that he's a new employee, technically contracted to gate research. He informs them that Tempus requested he facilitate some training sessions with him. He explains that so far he has an exceptional knack for deduction and an unusual array of gamma abilities. They all zero back in on the simulation, and we see the intense student sprinting non-stop and doesn't seem close to slowing down and is gaining on Rez. Above him, we see Helmet Boy floating lower and lower to the ground, he too tired from flexing his brain. Rez flings a mini twister in his direction that Helmet Boy is too exhausted to evade and is swept off of his feet and sent rolling over onto the edge and is left hanging on with 2 hands when suddenly 4 vibro javelins are chucked at him by a group of humanoid reptilian cyborg tribesmen with great precision, and all of them flying true, each impaling a separate region of his body as he plummets out of the simulation. With just Rez and the 10th student left, the entire obstacle course begins to morph and break apart into large chunks of marble as everything above, below, and around them turn white. Rez gains his footing, as does the 10th student. The smug trainer descends from the sky and lands on a giant slab of marble large enough to spar in behind the finish line. The 10th student and Rez make eye contact once again, and then both begin making their way toward the line as fast as they can. Rez turns to look at him and sees his eyes are already dead set on Rez and begins to pass him suddenly. Rez musters up enough willpower to energy dash one last time, but the 10th student takes a giant leap and catches up. Rez realizes that if he takes another leap like he just did, and with no sign of slowing down, he will beat Rez to the finish line, destroying his chances to discover the smug trainer's mutations. Rez is struck with a sick sense of desperation and without thinking, fires a beam right at his back, blasting him right out of the sky, mid-jump, hitting a slab of marble on the way down and slipping through the field of floating marble remnants out of the obstacle course. Rez arrives to the finish line and drops to his knees to catch his breath while smiling ear to ear in excitement for what's to come. He stands up and bows deeply toward the smug trainer. He tells the instructor that he hopes he can learn much from this session with him. The instructor disapproves of his attack on the last student. It's written all over his face. He holds his hand out as a battle staff made of black marble arises from the platform, and he retrieves it. Their surroundings go from a blank white to now flying through a giant field of yellow flowers under a blue sky amongst hundreds of other flying flower petals. The smug trainer smirks and tells Rez to come learn his first lesson. Rez energy dashes forward and throws a punch at the instructor's head, but he parries it with his hand and jabs his staff into Rez's throat, then brings his staff around and over his head and then across Rez's head, sending him spinning 30 times before hitting the ground hard, still choking and holding his neck. The trainer walks slowly around Rez as he gathers himself up, extremely disoriented. He shakes off his blurry vision and summons 2 imperfect clones that don't look like him. However, he was successfully able to tie in his elemental wind and fire manipulation and imbuing each energy clone with said elements. Rez, overly excited at what he just did, looks the clones up and down. The smug trainer whispers to the other trainers watching from the outside. It's almost as if he never used this power before, and they all begin to wonder how many powers Rez has. Rez focuses his sights back on the trainer and says, "Oh, this is gonna be fun." The smug trainer laughs and gestures with his fingers to bring the attack. Rez and his 2 clones begin to attack the trainer with melee strikes from all angles, but he effortlessly evades Rez's little to no combat ability. His moves inefficient and telegraphed. Rez even mixes it up with a few energy beams, but the trainer either flipped out of the way or he missed. Rez's fire clone comes at him with a sloppy left hook wrapped in fire, but the trainer sidesteps it and slams his marble staff into the ground under the clone that causes a sound vibration so strong it temporarily stuns the clone, and he then swings his staff right through it, destroying it. then continues the momentum of his swing into a fully revolving staff twirl above his head, causing a strong pull that snatches the wind clone up into a cyclone. He then swings his staff, hitting the wind clone, destroying it as well. Rez, vastly impressed and curious about his ability, soon comes to learn that he is just an amazing martial artist with the staff, and also incredibly strong to wield a battle staff made of black marble. The trainer speaks. Hey, he tells Rez that here at Gate, we teach students how to use their talents over their abilities, and learn to build your abilities around your talents. Rez is listening and as focused on learning as he is trying to keep his arms steady while blasting at the trainer. The trainer closes the distance and rolls right into Rez, who uses this opportunity to grab his opponent's battle staff and successfully gets his grip on it. A gust of wind blows in from behind the trainer that manifests into a wind clone, flying in with a reckless kick, but misses when the trainer spins both him and Rez out of the way, overpowering him, then backflip kicks off of Rezinoc, causing him to let go of the staff and landing 5 yards away from him. The smug trainer wipes his battle staff off with Rezinoc's blood. So, other than being really smart, what else can you do? Rezinoc wants to ask him the same thing. Rez knows there has to be something else hidden in there. He stretches his arms and states that in addition to learning, he adapts what he learns physically and mentally. The smug trainer looks intrigued, and the other trainers whisper into his ear to give Rez a battle staff. The trainer summons a battle staff in front of Rez and says, "Well, let's see what you've taught yourself." Rez waves off the battle staff and summons his own staff, displaying that he has also learned how to input commands into the training simulation. All of the spectating trainers and instructors are stunned by his analytical ability. Rez grabs his staff and begins performing a staff kata, identical to what he had seen the trainer do, then gestures for the trainer to make his first move. We see Chronicle let out a chuckle, then seals his mouth when all of the serious faces of the instructors turn to him. The smug trainer begins to jog, then enters into a full sprint toward Rez, whose marble staff ignites on fire. The trainer somersaults over Rez's head and engages with him in intense staff combat, both parrying and deflecting each other's attacks. The trainer is holding back and is gauging Rez's performance, but Rez is focused and barely able to keep up. The trainer sweeps at Rez's legs, but Rez leaps into the air and begins to attack while hovering on a funnel of wind, the embers from his blazing staff exploding in all directions. The trainer, unfazed, after minutes of intense combat against Rez and coming and going clones, the trainer decides to bring the fight to a close and performs a finesse double feint that leaves Rez open, and he jabs his staff into his ribs, shattering the barrier of wind Rez had protecting himself and his rib along with it. Then brings his staff crashing down onto Rez's head, shattering the wind barrier, splitting his head wide open and knocking him unconscious. Rez wakes up and finds himself in Gates' infirmary with wrapped ribs and head. On a mounted television screen on the wall, he sees Anarchy 12 giving his public service announcement and can hear a lot of commotion and scrambling out in the halls. One of Gates' head scientists enters into the room along with the smug trainer, and they shut the door behind them. "Hello, Rezinoc. My name is Dr. Coda, and I am the one tending to you today." His face looks concerned as he peers down at his stack of papers. Rez greets him and thanks the trainer for his lesson earlier. The trainer nods. Rez feels his body and head and tells the doctor which rib is broken and how broken it is, as well as how bad the concussion is. The doctor, impressed by Rez's self-diagnosis, applauds his knowledge as he places his x-rays up one by one. The doctor then turns to him slowly. "You know a lot about everything, it seems, but Can you tell us more about you, Rezinoc? He hands Rez documents and photos of his own genetic code. Rez looks down and sees that his DNA is vastly dissimilar to any species of people known to exist. Rez looks perplexed by what he is seeing and realizes that he actually never really thought about himself and his origins. A sudden onset of deja vu comes over him in the form of a feeling of impending doom, triggered by Anarchy's closing statement and murder of Advocate. Gate agents burst into the room and request for the smug trainer to come along. Tempus is requesting all hands on deck. Come on. The smug trainer looks at Rez and tells him good job out there today, and then departs. Dr. Coda requests that Rez gets more rest. He turns the TV off and exits the room. Rez looks back down at his blood tests, questioning himself.